And welcome everyone to another episode of Riz Talks. I'm your host Riz. Thank you for joining me to explore a deeply uncomfortable question. Why do some lives seem more important than others? Whites in America, Jews in Israel, Hindus in India, the wealthy everywhere. Our motto is to think again about our views. As Desmond Tutu once said, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Let us reflect on the way we see the world and ourselves. Today's topic, All Lives Matter, is a minefield. It has more than one meaning. We'll discuss that. We're talking about a phrase that has sparked furious debate, social media wars, and even violence. A phrase that sounds simple, even noble, but carries layers of complexity. A phrase that on its face seems utterly uncontroversial. A phrase that says every human being, regardless of race, religion, nationality, social status, deserves dignity, protection, and respect. That phrase is all lives matter. But here's the thing about the truth. Sometimes the most obvious truths are the most contested. And sometimes the people who say all lives matter are not trying to unite us. They try to silence someone else. As the old African proverb says, when the elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. So today we're going to look at the historical facts, the current realities, and the future possibilities. We're going to talk about slavery, colonization, indigenous massacres, and the lingering effects of a world built on hierarchy. And we're going to ask, is all lives matter a beautiful aspiration or a dangerous distraction? Let's find out. Let me start with a number that should keep any of us awake at night. According to the Equal Justice Initiative, between the end of Reconstruction in 1877 and 1950, there were at least 4,400 documented lynchings of black people in the United States. These were not random acts of violence. And this is not the only example. There are similar examples all over the world based on different religions, race, and so on. There were public spectacles, the lynchings, sometimes advertised in newspapers, attended by thousands, with photographers selling postcards of the body. The invention of hierarchical humanity has a historical perspective. For most of human history, your life's value depended entirely on your tribe, your castle, your religion, or your skin color. Take the transatlantic slave trade. Between 1525 and 1866, approximately 12.5 million Africans were forcibly transported to the Americas. Of those, almost 2 million died during the Middle Passage alone, suffocated, starved, or thrown overboard like garbage. That's not a statistic, that's a floating graveyard. And this happened to the Indians who were exported to other places as well. So, the legal justification that African people were not fully human was explained at the time to the locals. The British Parliament's 1729 York Talbot opinion declared that enslaved people were property, not persons, and could be treated as such. The indigenous people in Australia were part of the flora and fauna till 1967. This dehumanization still prevails in places where discrimination thrives and is a tool used to exploit people, murder them, create problems, commit genocides. In Australia, between 1788 and 1900, indigenous people of Tasmania were reduced from an estimated 3,000 to 16 people. The Black Line of 1830, a military style operation involving soldiers, settlers, and convicts, were designed to round up and remove Aboriginal people from their lands. There was a bounty. You could get £2 or something for every person you killed, even kids. The official policy was protection. The actual outcome was genocide. In what is now Namibia, the Herero and Nama people of German Southwest Africa between 1904 and 1908, and this is just about 100 years ago, German colonial forces systematically murdered some estimated 100,000 Herero and 10,000 Nama, about 80% of the Herero population, practically wiping them out. This was the first genocide of the 20th century, and it directly inspired the methods of the Holocaust decades later. Even the Holocaust, where millions of Jews were murdered, was preceded by a system that legally defined who counted as full humans and who didn't. These are not ancient history. These are the foundations of the modern world. They are people who've survived the Holocaust. Funnily, throughout history, every dominant group has claimed to be the most civilized, the most advanced, the most deserving of life and beyond. And this claim even persists today. The Romans called everyone else barbarians, a word that originally meant those who didn't speak Greek. The British called colonialism the white man's burden, as if enslaving half the world was an act of charity. And today we have billionaires funding space programs while millions starve, because apparently escaping Earth is a more worthy investment than feeding the people living on it. As the philosopher Voltaire once wrote, it is forbidden to kill. Therefore, all murderers are punished unless they kill in large numbers and to the sound of trumpets, or as these days, in a uniform, part of a military or a defense force. The history of humanity is the history of that hypocrisy. Now, let's bring this to the present. Surely in the 21st century, we have moved beyond such blatant hierarchies, you think? Surely we have learned that all lives have equal value? The data says otherwise. In the United States, a black man is 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than a white man. In Israel, the contrast is stark. Jewish Israelis have full citizenship rights, including the right to vote, own land, and live in anywhere. Palestinian citizens of Israel face legal discrimination in housing, employment, and land ownership, besides being afraid of getting murdered and insulted every day. Especially Palestinians in the occupied territories live under military law, with separate roads, separate courts, and a permit system that controls every aspect of their lives, from work to travel to medical care. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reported that in 2023 alone, Israeli forces killed over 300 Palestinians in the West Bank, including 70 children, and that figure is now multiplied by 5. There is no Hamas in the West Bank. The number since has risen considerably without the excuse of a terrorist organization living amongst them. The excuse to massacre 100,000 civilians in Gaza, almost, so more than 70,000 bodies have been found, but there are hundreds of thousands looking for their relatives still today. Some of those bodies will probably remain buried under the rubble for years, if not more. Now let's talk about the global hierarchy. The world's richest 1% own nearly half of global wealth. The poorest 50% own just 1%. A child born in Chad, Africa, has a life expectancy of 54 years. A child born in Japan can expect to live up to 85 years. Your postal code or your passport is still the single best predictor of how long and how well you will live. This is where all lives matter becomes a rhetorical weapon. When Black Lives Matter activists protested police brutality in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, critics responded with all lives matter. On its face, true, but in context, it was a dismissal. Globally, conflicts reveal similar disparities. Civilian casualties in war zones often depend on geography, media attention, and geopolitical interest. Some tragedies dominate headlines, others barely make a scrolling ticker. Sudan is a current example. So, where do we go from here? Is a world where all lives truly matter even possible? Or is it a utopian fantasy like world peace or a truly fair tax system? There are reasons for hope and reasons for despair. After the Rwanda 1994 genocide, in which Hutu extremists killed an estimated 800,000 and moderate Hutu in just 100 days, the country was shattered. Neighbors had killed neighbors. Churches had become slaughterhouses. The international community had watched and done nothing. But in the years since, Rwanda has attempted something remarkable. They have built a justice system based not just on punishment, but on kakaka, community courts that focus on truth telling, confession, and reconciliation. Hundreds of thousands of perpetrators confessed their crimes. Millions of survivors participated. While the system was not perfect, it has allowed Rwanda to function again, to rebuild, to move forward. This is what all lives matter could mean. This is similar to what happened in South Africa as well. Not the erasure of specific suffering, but the acknowledgement that every suffering is worthy of attention. The death of a Palestinian child is as tragic as the death of an Israeli child. That the life of a black man in Chicago is as valuable as the life of a white man in Boston. That the indigenous woman in Brazil fighting for her forest has the same right to exist as the billionaire buying it for cattle. To believe that all lives matter, you must act like they do. You must redistribute resources. You must dismantle systems that privilege some over others. You must face the uncomfortable truth that your comfort might be built on someone else's exploitation. You must stop blaming some minorities or people who have been discriminated just because they are reacting. So let's summarize what we've discussed today. First, the idea that all lives are equal has never been a historical reality. From the transatlantic slave trade to Australian colonization to the German genocide in Namibia, human life has systematically valued based on race, religion, and nationality. Those were not accidents, they were policies. Today, survivors of the Holocaust generation are committing a Holocaust. Second, the hierarchy persists today. Black Americans are killed by police at disproportionately high rates. Indigenous people are incarcerated in Australia at a higher rate. Palestinians live under military occupation, while Jewish Israelis enjoy full citizenship. The global wealth gap means that where you are born determines how long you live. Even emergency aid in natural disasters is apportioned according to the postcode. Third, the phrase all lives matter is often used not as a genuine statement of universal value, but as a dismissal of specific suffering. Now, what is the solution? It's not complicated, though it is difficult. The solution is to start with those who are suffering most. If a house is on fire, you don't say all houses matter. You put out the fire in that house. The solution is reparative justice, not just apologies, but action. Returning land, paying compensation, rebuilding what was destroyed. South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, imperfect as it was, understood this. You cannot have reconciliation without truth, and you cannot have justice without repair. To start, we have to teach history honestly. In the United States, many states have banned the teaching of critical race theory, a graduate level legal concept that has become a catch all for any discussion of racism. In Israel, schools teach very different histories to Jewish and Palestinian students. In Japan, textbooks downplay the atrocities committed in Nanjing and Korea. We cannot heal what we refuse to remember. There is reason for cautious optimism. Younger generations are more globally connected than ever. Social media, despite its chaos, has democratized awareness. Issues that were once hidden are now exposed in real time. But awareness without action is just well informed apathy. The future hinges on whether we move from performative empathy to structural changes. That means addressing the systemic inequalities, investing in education and equity, holding institutions accountable and governments, not just individuals. And perhaps most importantly, understanding that equality isn't just about saying all lives matter. It requires acknowledging the legacy of slavery, the massacres of indigenous people, the lasting effects of colonization, and the ongoing inequalities baked into modern systems in many parts of the world. Most importantly, we must expand our circle of compassion. The philosopher Peter Singer argues that our moral circle has expanded over time from tribe to nation to all humans, but it has not expanded far enough. We still value the life of a person who looks like us more than someone who doesn't. So the next time you hear someone say all lives matter, ask them, what are you going to do about it? What are you doing to make that true? Ask yourself, whose life am I not seeing? Whose suffering am I ignoring because it's inconvenient? Generally say, who are we really? Are we the people who say all lives matter or the people who act like they do? Think again about what you believe, what you've been told, and what you might have never questioned. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Riz Talks. It's now time to act, so please share the message with others. Think again, challenge ideas, join the conversation, and subscribe. This is Riz Talks. Be curious, be kind, and come back for more.